Nebraska's vast prairies may seem ordinary at first glance, but the land hides secrets etched deep in time, from fossil beds that froze creatures in ash, to hills tied to ghostly legends, to ancient Pawnee villages and fiery volcanoes. These mysteries reveal a Nebraska where history, myth, and the unexplained still linger in the soil and sky. Ashfall fossil beds. Out in the gentle hills of northern Nebraska, there is a place that looks almost ordinary at first glance. Tall grass sways in the wind, meadowlarks sing, and the wide prairie feels endless. But just under that calm surface lies one of the most haunting stories ever uncovered in the American heartland. This place is called Ashfall Fossil Beds, and it holds a mystery written not in old stone carvings or forgotten ruins, but in the very bones of animals that died together 12 million years ago. The story of how this fossil bed came to be starts with an eruption far away from Nebraska. In what is now Idaho, a supervolcano exploded with such force that ash clouds traveled hundreds of miles east. The eruption was enormous, much bigger than anything humans have witnessed in modern times. The fine glassy ash drifted across the plains, carried by wind, and when it finally settled, it blanketed the land of Nebraska in a heavy layer. For the animals living here, it was the beginning of the end. This part of Nebraska back then was not a quiet prairie like today. It was more like an African savanna. Herds of rhinos, not the same kind we know today, but three-toed relatives, roamed alongside small horses, saber-toothed deer, camels, turtles, and countless birds. At the center of their world were watering holes, places where life gathered. One such watering hole sat right where Ashfall is today. When the ash fell, animals came here for water, maybe already coughing and wheezing as their lungs filled with dust. They tried to survive, but the ash worked slowly and cruelly. First it coated their food, grinding down teeth and causing hunger. Then, as they breathed it in, it filled their lungs, leading to suffocation over days and weeks. The result was a tragic scene. Animals collapsing one by one, sometimes in groups, sometimes alone, their bodies piling up around the watering hole. Unlike most fossil sites where bones scatter and rot, here the ash acted like a protective blanket. It sealed the skeletons in place before scavengers or weather could disturb them. Millions of years later, when paleontologists began to dig, they found whole skeletons preserved exactly as they had fallen. That's where the mystery begins. Standing in the excavation hall today, you can see rhinos lying side by side, mothers with calves still close by. Some are positioned as though they simply laid down to rest. Others look frozen mid-motion. The skeletons are nearly perfect, every rib, every toe, even fragile bird bones still intact. Normally such fine details are lost to time, but here they remain, as if death came yesterday. Scientists can even read the story of their suffering from the bones. Microscopic cuts and wear on teeth show how animals tried to eat plants coated with gritty ash. Abnormal growth in the ribs reveals the damage to lungs, the body's attempt to fight back before failing. In some cases, stomach contents survived, giving us clues about what they ate in their last meals. Instead of just fossils, Ashfall gives us a vivid picture of life and death during one of prehistory's most violent disasters. Still, big questions hang over this site. Why did so many animals end up concentrated in one spot? Was this watering hole unusually important? Or did the ash make other water sources unusable, funneling every creature here? Why does Nebraska hold such a unique deposit when the ash cloud stretched far wider? And how is it that the preservation is so complete, with skeletons stacked like pages in a book? Science offers theories, but no single answer ties everything neatly together. That's what gives Ashfall its air of mystery. When you stand on the viewing platform inside the fossil bed building, it almost feels like intruding. Below you, half-buried skeletons lie in the same dirt that covered them for millions of years. You can see the curve of a rhino's back, the delicate legs of small horses, turtles huddled in the dust. The dig site is kept open to the public, so you don't just see fossils in glass cases, you see them where they were found, with paleontologists still brushing away ash. It's quiet inside, almost reverent. Many visitors describe the feeling as standing in a prehistoric cathedral, one built by tragedy rather than by hands. The positives of this site today are undeniable. It's one of the most important fossil sites in the world, offering direct insight into the Miocene epoch. Scientists travel from around the globe to study it. School children get to see science happening right in front of them, watching new discoveries emerge from the ground. And for Nebraska, it's a source of pride, a reminder that the quiet prairie holds secrets just as fascinating as any desert or jungle. But there are negatives too. Fossils this delicate can crumble quickly once exposed to air. That means constant care is required, with scientists working slowly and carefully to stabilize each discovery. The site also faces the challenge of funding. It's far from major cities, tucked in rural countryside, which means it doesn't always attract the visitor numbers or financial support of more famous fossil sites. And there's a looming question of climate. Harsh winters, hotter summers, and unpredictable storms could affect the structures that protect the fossil beds. For all its grandeur, Ashfall is fragile. For me, walking through the site left me conflicted. On one hand, it's breathtaking to look at a complete rhino family frozen in time. You can almost imagine them moving. Hear the sound of hooves on the ground, picture them gathering around the water. On the other hand, there's a weight to it. You're not just seeing bones, you're seeing lives cut short in a slow, suffocating disaster. It's awe mixed with sadness. My opinion lands in the middle. I'm amazed at the preservation, grateful for what it teaches us, but I can't ignore the eerie sadness that comes from staring at death frozen for eternity. Today, the Ashfall fossil beds are both a working research site and a public park. A massive barn-like building shelters the dig, with elevated walkways circling the excavation. Outside, trails lead through grasslands where modern animals live, deer, coyotes, and prairie birds, completely unaware of the ancient bones below. In summer, the prairie bursts with green, and in winter, snow softens the hills. The contrast is striking, a living landscape above, a fossil graveyard beneath. The present situation here is steady but delicate. The site is open to the public, with educational programs running every year. New fossils are uncovered slowly, sometimes just inches at a time, each one adding to the story. Scientists hope to keep parts of the bed untouched for future generations, who may have better tools to learn from them. But maintaining the balance, protecting the fossils, supporting research, and keeping the site open to visitors is a constant challenge. Ashfall fossil beds remains one of Nebraska's greatest ancient mysteries. It tells us of a distant past, of herds that lived and died on this land long before humans walked it. Yet even with science, even with years of careful study, the full story of how this one spot became a mass grave is not completely clear, and maybe that's what keeps it alive in our imagination. The combination of knowledge and mystery, of tragedy and preservation. Signal Butte. If you head west into Nebraska's Panhandle, you'll find a low rise that doesn't seem all that remarkable at first. It isn't as dramatic as the Rockies on the horizon, nor as iconic as Chimney Rock, but Signal Butte, standing quietly on the open plains, has a weight that you can't measure just by looking. This place has been called one of the most important prehistoric sites in Nebraska, and its mystery lies in the layers of history stacked inside it, layers that stretch back thousands of years, far older than most people realize. Archaeologists first recognized the importance of Signal Butte in the early 1900s. When they began to dig, they found something unusual. Not just one level of human use, but several, buried one beneath another, were traces of different groups of people who had returned to this same spot across centuries. At the top, they found the remains of late prehistoric tribes. Digging deeper, they uncovered artifacts from much earlier groups, stretching back to nearly 5,000 years ago. Each layer revealed campfires, stone tools, and broken pottery, telling the story of generations who all chose this rise on the prairie as a place to live, gather, and survive. The butte wasn't just convenient, it was strategic. From the top, you can see for miles in every direction. The rolling plains stretch out endlessly, and in the distance, landmarks like Scott's Bluff break the horizon. For ancient people, this view was priceless. It allowed them to watch herds of bison moving across the grassland, to keep an eye on weather rolling in, and maybe even to spot enemies before they came too close. Some believe Signal Butte was used as a lookout post, or even as a kind of signaling station, where fires lit at night could be seen from afar. That's how the name Signal Butte stuck, though no one can say for certain how it was actually used. What we do know is that the site was a hub. Archaeologists found evidence of hearths, stone circles blackened by fire that speak of repeated camp life. Stone flakes and projectile points show that tools were made and sharpened here, weapons prepared for hunting. Some of the pottery fragments suggest trade, carrying styles and designs not native to the immediate area. It's as though Signal Butte drew people back again and again, a familiar stop on the landscape of the Great Plains. Yet for all the discoveries, mysteries remain. Why did people choose to return to this exact spot over and over? The butte isn't especially tall, and water sources nearby are limited. Was it mainly the visibility, or did it carry a deeper, perhaps even spiritual significance? And what of the layers themselves? The artifacts don't belong to one culture but to many. Did they pass stories down about this place, each group remembering it from the ones before? Or did they come fresh each time, drawn by the land without knowing its past? Those questions remain unanswered. Standing on Signal Butte today, you feel that weight of time pressing in. The land is quiet, winds sweep across the grass, and the horizon feels endless. You can almost imagine the smoke of a campfire rising into the evening air thousands of years ago, the smell of roasting meat carried on the wind. You picture hunters returning with bison hides slung over their shoulders, children playing with clay pots, voices rising in a language long lost. None of that can be proven, but the bones of the story are there, held in the soil. The positives of Signal Butte today are in its recognition as an archaeological treasure. It helped scientists piece together Nebraska's ancient past, showing that the Great Plains weren't empty spaces waiting for settlers. They were home to thriving, skilled peoples for millennia. The site also challenges old stereotypes about the plains as barren or lifeless. Signal Butte proves it was a landscape full of activity, memory, and continuity. But the negatives are hard to ignore. The site has been heavily disturbed over the years. Early excavations, though groundbreaking, lacked the careful methods of modern archaeology, and that means some evidence was lost. Looters and collectors also took artifacts, erasing context that could have given us clearer answers. Erosion is another problem. The Butte's soils shift under wind and rain, slowly wearing away the layers that once kept its secrets. Today, much of what remains is fragile, and without careful protection, more could vanish. My feelings about Signal Butte are mixed, somewhere between admiration and sadness. It's inspiring to stand on ground where countless generations once stood, knowing you're looking at the same horizon they looked at. It makes the past feel close, almost reachable. But it's also frustrating to know how much we'll never recover, how many stories have been lost to time, to careless digging, and to simple erosion. I find myself neutral overall, grateful for what has been learned, aware of what has been lost, and respectful of what still lies buried. Today, Signal Butte doesn't look like much to a casual visitor. It's on private land, not a polished park with signs and facilities. There's no museum nearby, no clear trail to lead you up. If you were to pass by, you might not even notice it. The landscape hides its importance well, but in archaeological records, and in the minds of those who study Nebraska's deep past, Signal Butte still stands as one of the earliest and most revealing windows into life on the plains. Its present situation is quiet, almost forgotten, but its layers continue to whisper of campfires, hunters, and families who once called this windswept hill home. Palmer Site, Palmer. If you stand near the Loup River close to the small town of Palmer, Nebraska, you might not notice anything remarkable at first. The land stretches out in quiet fields, broken only by the hum of tractors in summer and the rustle of prairie grass in the wind. But centuries ago, this ground was the heart of a thriving Pawnee community, the Skiddy Band of the Pawnee Nation. Archaeologists call it the Palmer Site, also known as 25HW1, also known as 25NW1, and what once stood here was one of the largest Pawnee villages ever uncovered. Though little remains visible above the soil today, the earth below tells a story of ritual, survival, and mystery that still echoes across Nebraska's plains. The Pawnee were among the most influential native peoples of the central Great Plains, and the Skiddy, one of their major divisions, were known for their distinct rituals and deep ties to the stars. Unlike nomadic tribes that followed bison herds constantly, the Pawnee lived in permanent earth lodges clustered into villages. From these homes, they farmed corn, beans, and squash, and then followed seasonal hunts. The Palmer Site shows us just how large and complex their communities could be. Archaeologists found evidence of about 120 earth lodges here, spread across the landscape in organized patterns. Imagine it, dozens of dome-shaped lodges made from timber and packed earth, smoke curling from their tops, families moving in and out, children running between homes. At its height, this village may have housed 1,000 or more people. What makes Palmer Site especially important is the evidence of ceremonial structures. At the center of the village stood a large council circle, believed to have been a place of gathering for leaders, warriors, and spiritual figures. Surrounding it were other features, storage pits for grain, hearths for fires, and areas that appear to have been used for ritual. Archaeologists even uncovered burial grounds tied to the site, with remains carefully placed in ways that suggest cultural and religious meaning. One of the most striking elements associated with the Skiddy Pawnee is the Morning Star ceremony, a controversial and deeply mysterious ritual that has fascinated researchers for generations. Historical accounts suggest that this ceremony involved a sacrificial rite tied to the rising of the morning star, part of a larger Pawnee belief system that connected human life to the movements of celestial bodies. While details are debated, and while the practice itself faded under the pressures of outside influence and change, its memory lingers in the stories tied to places like the Palmer site. Standing there today, you can't help but wonder what ceremonies unfolded on this very ground under the wide Nebraska sky. Daily life at Palmer would have been a blend of hard work and community spirit. Families tended gardens near the village, growing crops that stored well through harsh winters. Hunters set out across the plains, bringing back bison meat and hides. Inside the lodges, fires glowed through cold nights, with tools, pottery, and sacred objects lining the walls. The layout of the village itself reveals planning and cooperation, rows of lodges grouped in a way that gave space for both family life and shared rituals. The size of the settlement shows this wasn't just a temporary camp. It was a permanent, deeply rooted community, but mystery lingers in why the site was abandoned. Like many Pawnee villages, the Palmer site was eventually left behind as pressures mounted from disease, warfare, and displacement. By the time archaeologists studied the site in detail, the lodges had collapsed into mounds, and only stains in the soil marked where posts once stood. No written records exist from the Pawnee themselves about Palmer specifically. That gap leaves us to wonder what final ceremonies were held before the people moved on. What happened to the community when they left their homes behind? The answers are lost to time, carried only in oral histories and fragments buried in the ground. Visiting the site today is a humbling experience. There are no reconstructed lodges here, no tourist signs or bustling crowds. Much of the land lies on private property, used for farming. In summer, rows of corn ripple in the wind where the Skeety once planted their own crops. The Lupa River still runs nearby, slow and steady, just as it did when the Pawnee drew water from it. If you know what to look for, faint rises in the soil mark where earth lodges once stood, but to most eyes, it's just another piece of farmland. The contrast is striking. A place that once held thousands of lives and ceremonies now looks almost empty. The positives of the Palmer site today lie in its preservation through archaeology. The records and maps made by researchers ensure that even if the land has changed, the story of the village isn't forgotten. Artifacts from Palmer, including pottery, tools, and remains of structures, have given us insight into Pawnee craftsmanship and daily life. For the Pawnee people themselves, the site is part of their cultural memory, a physical reminder of their ancestors' strength and traditions. And for Nebraska, it's a chance to connect with a deeper past, one that existed long before settlers arrived. But there are also negatives. Unlike some ancient sites that are protected as parks or monuments, Palmer doesn't have widespread recognition. It isn't marked for the casual visitor, and without that visibility, it risks slipping into obscurity. Farming and natural erosion have altered the land, and with each passing season, small pieces of the past are lost. Looting in earlier decades also stripped away artifacts without proper record, meaning some of the story has been scattered and broken, and perhaps most importantly, the sacred nature of the site makes it sensitive. For many Pawnee descendants, Palmer is not just a scientific resource, but a spiritual place tied to ancestors and rituals, and it deserves respect beyond archaeology. When I think about the Palmer site, my feelings are caught between fascination and caution. On one hand, the sheer scale of the village is amazing. It proves that the plains were home to large, thriving communities, not just scattered bands. It gives weight to the idea that this land was never empty, but deeply lived in. On the other hand, the lack of public care for the site troubles me. So much history lies beneath those fields, yet only a handful of people truly know its depth. My opinion, if I had to state it, is neutral. I respect the scientific importance, I recognize the cultural weight, and I believe both deserve to be honored. But I also see how easy it is for places like Palmer to fade from public memory, buried twice, once by soil, and again by neglect. The present situation at the Palmer site is one of quiet survival. The land is used for agriculture, the soil tilled and planted year after year. The site itself isn't open for tourism, but its artifacts and records live on in museums and archives. Pawnee descendants still know its importance, and archaeologists keep it in their studies as one of the most significant Pawnee village sites in the region. To stand near it today is to stand on ordinary ground that hides extraordinary history. It is calm now, filled with the hum of modern life, but just beneath, it still holds the memory of fires burning in earth lodges, of ceremonies beneath the stars, and of a community that thrived until history pulled it in another direction. Blackbird Hill. Blackbird Hill rises above the Missouri River in northeastern Nebraska, a place where the land itself seems to hold on to memory. If you climb it on a windy day, the gusts sweep over the bluff and carry with them a strange feeling, like you've stepped into a story older than you can measure. For centuries, people have looked at this hill not just as a natural landmark, but as something touched by history, tragedy, and mystery. Even its name, Blackbird Hill, reaches back to one of the most powerful figures of the Omaha tribe, Chief Blackbird. Chief Blackbird was a leader during the late 1700s, a time when European traders were just beginning to make their way through the Great Plains. He was known for his influence, his shrewdness in dealing with outsiders, and for maintaining control over trade routes that passed through Omaha land. Blackbird earned such a reputation that even foreign visitors wrote about him. When he died around 1800, legend says he was buried on horseback, overlooking the Missouri so his spirit could keep watch over his people and the traders passing by. If you stand on the bluff today, it's easy to imagine why. The view is sweeping, stretching out across the river valley with a sense of command. His grave became a landmark for boatmen on the Missouri for years, who were told that the figure of Blackbird, high on his hill, still watched their passage. But the story of Blackbird Hill doesn't end with its namesake chief. What gives this place such a heavy air of mystery is a tale that feels both haunting and deeply human, a love story that spiraled into tragedy. According to legend, sometime in the mid-1800s, a young woman from the east fell in love with a man she met near the river. She promised to return and marry him, but time and distance worked against them. While she was gone, her family pushed her into a different marriage, one that offered security but no joy. Years later, she and her husband traveled west, and by chance they stopped near Blackbird Hill. There she reunited with her first love. Old feelings stirred, and before long the truth came out. The husband, consumed with jealousy and rage, attacked. He killed his wife in a fit of passion, and buried her body near the hill. The story has been told in hushed tones for generations. Locals say that on certain nights, especially when the river fog rolls thick, you can hear a woman crying out from the hill, her voice carried on the wind. Some even claim they've seen ghostly figures wandering near the slope, as if the doomed lovers are still trying to find each other. Whether the story is rooted in fact or not, it has become part of the identity of Blackbird Hill. It's no longer just a bluff with a grave. It's a place layered with emotion, tragedy, and the unexplained. There's something about the way these stories overlap, one tied to the power of a great chief, another to an intimate personal tragedy that gives Blackbird Hill its aura. One layer is about leadership and control of the land, the other about love and betrayal. And when you stand there, you can't help but feel the weight of both. The wind seems sharper, the sky a little bigger, the ground a little less stable beneath your feet. Places like this don't just hold history, they press it into you. In the present day, the site still attracts visitors, though not in large crowds. It isn't polished up with visitor centers or paved paths the way other historic sites might be. That's both a strength and a drawback. On the positive side, the lack of heavy development means the hill feels untouched. You can walk it and feel close to the past without layers of signs or fences getting in the way. Nature still dominates, and the bluff still offers the kind of view that would make sense as a burial place for a chief. On the negative side, it also means that the site is easy to overlook, and some of its stories risk fading from memory. Without more protection or interpretation, erosion and neglect could slowly erase both the physical place and the legends tied to it. From a neutral perspective, it's one of those sites where mystery thrives because of what we don't know. Was the tragic love story true, or was it a tale created to explain strange sounds on windy nights? Was Chief Blackbird really buried on horseback, or has time bent the details into legend? We can't answer with certainty, but maybe that's the point. If we could pin everything down, the place would lose that strange pull it has on people. Standing on Blackbird Hill, you're aware of how small you are compared to the sweep of time, and how the land itself can outlast both leaders and lovers. Today, if you visit, you'll find a mix of beauty and eeriness. The bluff still overlooks the wide Missouri, just as it did in Blackbird's time. The grass moves in long waves, and the river carves its steady path. But there are also moments that feel unsettling. The quiet can be too deep, broken only by sudden bursts of wind. The slope can feel isolating, cut off from the busy world below. Some visitors say they feel watched, as if the eyes of both the chief and the restless spirits of the tragic tale still linger. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, the atmosphere is hard to shake. Blackbird Hill is not a tourist trap. It's not brightly lit or overly celebrated. Instead, it sits quietly, holding its secrets, waiting for those curious enough to climb it and listen to the wind. The positives are clear. it remains a beautiful natural space, an authentic connection to both native and settler histories, and a reminder of how stories root themselves in landscapes. The negatives are just as real: lack of upkeep, risk of erosion, and the uneasy way the tragic tale can overshadow the true history of the Omaha people. From my own perspective, I think the value of Blackbird Hill lies in the way it forces us to sit with both myth and reality at once. You can stand there and honor the memory of a respected leader, while also reflecting on how human lives, whether through love, jealousy, or grief, leave lasting marks on the land. Neither story cancels the other out. They coexist, adding layers of meaning to the same hilltop. In its present situation, Blackbird Hill remains accessible but fragile. The stories tied to it still circulate, though not as widely as they once did. Some locals keep the legends alive, others let them slip into the background. The land itself holds steady, for now, though time and weather slowly wear it down. If you go, you'll find a quiet place where beauty meets sorrow, where history and legend blur together, and where the Missouri River keeps flowing past, carrying both the truth and the mystery downstream. Ionia Volcano. Out on the eastern edge of Nebraska, near the wide flow of the Missouri River, there used to be a landmark that captured people's attention in a way that few other features of the plains ever did. It was called the Ionia Volcano. The name itself carried weight, and in the 19th century it stirred images of fire and fury, something foreign to the quiet stretches of prairie. Today, if you go searching for it, you won't find a smoking mountain or glowing earth. What remains is almost invisible to the casual traveler. But the story of this so-called volcano is one of the strangest natural mysteries Nebraska has ever held, and even in its absence, the legend continues to spark curiosity. When pioneers and explorers first came across the site in the mid-1800s, they were stunned. Rising from the prairie was a mound that looked alive. Smoke curled from cracks in its surface, the earth was warm, and the air carried the sharp, unpleasant smell of sulfur. In a flat, predictable landscape, this sight would have been shocking. Many had never seen a true volcano before, but the fiery appearance of this hill convinced them that one was smoldering here in Nebraska. Imagine riding along the Missouri, weary from travel, and suddenly spotting smoke rising not from a campfire, but from the ground itself. The scene would have felt both eerie and dangerous, like nature was warning travelers to keep their distance. The truth, though, was a little different. What people were witnessing wasn't volcanic activity at all. It was the slow underground burning of lignite deposits, soft, low-grade coal that lies close to the surface in some parts of the Midwest. When oxygen seeped into those layers through cracks in the rock, the coal could ignite and smolder for years. The heat traveled upward, warming the soil, releasing gases, and sending up faint plumes of smoke. On the surface, it created the perfect illusion of a miniature volcano. Scientists who later studied the Ionia volcano confirmed this explanation, but that didn't make the phenomenon any less fascinating. In fact, it made it stranger in a way. Here was fire hidden underground, sustained by the earth itself, creating the illusion of a volcano where none should exist. Travelers passing through recorded their impressions. Newspapers loved to publish reports of the burning mountain in Nebraska, some of them sensationalized with wild claims of glowing rivers of lava or fiery explosions. People came from miles around just to see the spectacle, and for a time it became one of the most unusual attractions along the Missouri River. For native peoples of the region, the Ionia volcano wasn't new. The Omaha, Ponca, and others had known of it long before settlers arrived. Stories circulated about the hill's unusual behavior, its smoke and its heat. It was part of the living land, another reminder that the earth had its own rhythms, sometimes dangerous, sometimes mysterious. For them, it wasn't necessary to label it a volcano or analyze its chemical cause. The burning hill was simply another expression of the power that shaped their world. But like all things, the Ionia volcano didn't last forever. Over time, the fires burned out. The lignite seams collapsed or were smothered. The constant erosion of the Missouri River also played a part. In 1877, devastating floods and landslides struck the region. Much of the hill gave way and slid into the river, taking with it the most visible part of the volcano. By the early 1900s, what had once been a famous smoking mound was reduced to a weathered remnant. Slowly, grass reclaimed the slopes, and the fiery spectacle became a memory rather than a sight. That fading away adds a bittersweet layer to the mystery. On one hand, it's easy to feel disappointed that nothing remains of what once amazed so many. On the other hand, it reminds us how temporary even the most dramatic natural features can be. What seems permanent can vanish in a generation. The Ionia Volcano story is proof that the Earth itself changes faster than we often realize, reshaping the landmarks we think will last forever. Standing on the land near the old site today, it's hard to imagine what once was. On the positive side, the area remains scenic. The Missouri River still winds through the valley, reflecting the sky, and the surrounding bluffs provide a sweeping view of Nebraska and Iowa. The quiet can feel restorative, a contrast to the noise and rush of modern life. There's also value in knowing the story, even if the visible signs are gone. It sparks the imagination, urging you to picture the smoke rising from the prairie and the puzzled expressions of those first travelers. The negatives are just as clear. Without visible evidence, the Ionia Volcano is easy to overlook. If you didn't already know the history, you might pass by without realizing anything remarkable had ever happened here. That invisibility puts the story at risk of being forgotten. Erosion, flooding, and the natural decay of the site have erased almost every trace. Even markers or signs can only do so much to keep the memory alive. There's also the lingering sense of loss, the knowledge that a unique natural phenomenon vanished before it could be preserved or fully understood. From a neutral point of view, the Ionia Volcano sits somewhere between myth and science. Its cause is known, but its effect remains almost legendary. Was it really as fiery and dramatic as the old reports claimed? Or did imagination, fear, and exaggeration turn a smoldering hill into something grander? We can't be sure. That uncertainty is part of its draw. It's not just geology, it's the way people responded to it, the way their stories grew and spread, and the way the land became larger than itself in human memory. Personally, I think the mystery of the Ionia Volcano lies less in the mechanics of burning coal and more in the reaction it stirred. Picture a pioneer family, exhausted from the journey, suddenly seeing smoke rolling out of a hill. Their world was already filled with hardship and uncertainty, and now the ground itself seemed alive. Fear and awe would mix in their minds, giving rise to stories that lived on long after the smoke disappeared. For me, that reaction is more interesting than the science. It shows how landscapes and people shape each other's stories. Today, the present situation is quiet. There is no volcano to see, no smoke to smell, no fiery glow to marvel at. The land has returned to its ordinary state, blending in with the rest of the river valley. A few historical references and markers keep the memory alive, but it doesn't attract crowds the way it once did. Locals may know the tale, but for most, it's a forgotten footnote in Nebraska's history. And yet the positives remain. The land is still beautiful, the view still commanding, and the story still capable of capturing imagination if someone takes the time to tell it. The negatives are the fading memory, the loss of visible mystery, and the quiet erosion of a place once filled with fire. The Ionia Volcano teaches us something important about mysteries tied to the land. They don't always last forever. Sometimes the mystery itself vanishes, leaving only stories, and we have to decide whether to let them fade or to carry them forward. The burning mound may be gone, but its legend remains, reminding us that even in Nebraska's calm prairies, the earth once glowed with fire.